Okay, great. Well, hello and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. We're so glad you could join the national webinar on using tenant-based housing vouchers to help end homelessness in Los Angeles from 2016 to 2020. I am Christina Miller. I'm the Senior Advocacy Officer at the Conrad Hilton Foundation for the Homelessness Initiative. And I get to give a few opening remarks before passing it over to Abt to dive deep into the study. And just, I will say on a personal note, I started my career working in direct services at a homeless service organization here in LA. I had the chance to witness the experience of people who are homeless looking for housing units while holding a tenant-based voucher and working with landlords. So I just want to say the content and focus of this study really excites me. I'll also say, because my sense is Nichole from Abt Associates will be too humble to say it, but the results of this study are incredibly meaningful, and recommendations and information presented here should be, and I hope will be, an important tool for the field as we move forward in the housing voucher policy and practice conversation. So just a quick note on the Conrad and Hilton Foundation. We are a global grant-making organization based in Los Angeles. We provide funds to nonprofit organizations working to improve the lives of individuals living in poverty and experiencing disadvantage. For the last 30 years, the Homelessness Initiative has been a key priority for the foundation, with the last 10 years focused on LA County. Over the last decade, we have made $175 million in grants to organizations working to help people who are experiencing homelessness connect to permanent housing. 10 years ago, the foundation contracted with Abt Associates to evaluate the initiative with the goal of answering this overarching question. Is the Chronic Homelessness Initiative an effective strategy to end and prevent chronic homelessness in LA County? So we've enjoyed Abt's partnership in that capacity for the last 10 years as our program evaluator, and continue to work with them on briefs like the one you are about to hear about today. I'll also share the impetus for Hilton commissioning the report can be summarized as threefold. One, that we recognize that tenant-based housing vouchers are critical to our system's success in ending homelessness, but we had limited sort of pooled information from the public housing authorities and from our continuum of care to help us understand the trends in utilization. Number two, specifically, we needed to understand how homeless households of color were succeeding in the program, or not. And given the overrepresentation of BIPOC households in our homelessness system, what implications do the findings have for addressing the disparities that we see in our homeless numbers? And three, there was a need for this brief to exist so it may guide subsequent policymaker education. And that would hopefully lead to securing additional housing-based vouchers for the LA area, as well as spotlight needed policy or practical changes to the program to ensure maximization of the resources. Before I hand it over to Nichole to lead us through this panel, I also just want to recognize that since the conclusion of this report, a very well-known voucher program was born out of the National Pandemic Response, which I think many of you on this call probably know, is the Emergency Housing Voucher Program, or EHVs. I just want to flag that this report does not explicitly consider the use of EHVs, but you will hear some of the key themes from the researchers and other panelists on the applicability of the findings from the study, and from the panelists on their experience with the EHV program, given that it is so front and center in terms of what communities are using to address homelessness currently. So I have talked enough with all that. I'm going to hand it over to Nichole Fiore, Senior Associate at Abt. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christina, and thank you all for joining us today to talk about a really important issue in Los Angeles County, the use of tenant-based vouchers for people experiencing homelessness. Christina and others from the Hilton Foundation are too humble to say, but they are an important investor and partner in the homeless service system and the service system's response to homelessness in Los Angeles County. Over the past decade, Abt has partnered with the Hilton Foundation on a variety of evaluation and research topics, including permanent supportive housing, chronic homelessness, housing development, affordable housing in Los Angeles County, the coordinated entry system, homeless service provider capacity building, and systems change. This brief that we'll talk about today and this research is examining the LA community's use and response for tenant-based vouchers for people experiencing homelessness. Before I dive into the research, I just want to thank the Hilton Foundation for its continued support in research and evaluation across the board and for investing in this specific research. I also want to thank the people with lived experience who shared their experiences and expertise and their stories with the Abt team during our data collection and analysis process. I also want to thank the Los Angeles region's public housing authorities, the homeless service system leaders, partners, and providers who participated in countless interviews with the Abt team. And finally, I want to thank the HUD Office of Policy Development and Research who provided us the administrative data extract that we used for the analysis for this study. Next slide. So, one of the fantastic things about this webinar, we are joined by a host of experts in the nation on the voucher system. So you already heard from Christina. Christina will join us again after the research discussion. We will also be joined by Tracy Jones, who is a Senior Vice President of the Housing Choice Voucher Program at Atlanta Housing, and Peter Lynn, the Chief Program Officer of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. Next slide. So in terms of an agenda for today, we've already done our welcome. We're really going to dive into what are federal tenant-based vouchers. We'll talk about the design of the study, research questions, and the data collection procedures that we went through. We'll talk about and highlight the big level findings that are both applicable for Los Angeles, but then on a larger scale across the nation. And then we'll open it up for a really vibrant discussion with panelists. The research presentation will be about 30 minutes, and then we'll have that discussion with our national experts. Throughout the presentation, you can submit questions using the chat function on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And we will also be recording this presentation, and the slides and the recording will be available on the Hilton Foundation's website and on the Abt website in about a week's time. Next slide. So we're first going to talk about what are federal housing vouchers. So HUD's Housing Choice Voucher Program is the federal government's largest program that provides housing assistance to the lowest income renters across the nation. Vouchers pay the difference between the rent of a housing unit and 30% of that household's income, however little that income is. So this is a program that can reach the most economically vulnerable people across the country. The household then uses that voucher and must find a rental unit in the private market that is available and has a willing landlord that will be able to participate in the program. So the use and the success of the program really often depends on the availability of private rental market in a community and having a willing landlord. Public housing authorities across the country administer this program on behalf of HUD. Specifically, Los Angeles County has 19 public housing authorities. The Housing Authority of the City LA and the Los Angeles Community Development Authority are amongst the largest voucher programs in the country. The City of Long Beach also has a substantial number of vouchers. The research and analysis that we've done today uses administrative data from all 19 PHAs across Los Angeles County. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the research questions that we went after for this study. So for those of you who are not in California or in Los Angeles County, currently there's a homelessness crisis in Los Angeles County. According to the 2022 point in time count, there was estimated close to 70,000 people experiencing homelessness over those 3 nights in February of 2022. Addressing homelessness is and has been for the past couple years the most important topic for residents, voters, and elected officials in Los Angeles County. So it's really important that we think about how our housing resources, how our service resources are used across LA County, and how successful people are at actually using them in the housing market. So the overarching research questions that we are looking at are, how do the PHAs in the LA region use federal tenant-based vouchers as part of the effort to end homelessness? And then how successful are those people experiencing homelessness in using that vouchers in the private rental market? Why are these questions important to look at? Christina made a note of 3 very important reasons why. And so really just to reiterate, the federal housing vouchers are the largest rental subsidy resource that Los Angeles has to end homelessness. And knowing this information that we've dug up as research as part of the study can help identify potential improvements in using that resource, support successful use of other rental subsidy resources that may look like federal tenant-based vouchers, and also help advocate for more federal housing vouchers to come to Los Angeles County. Next slide. In terms of the data that we collected and analyzed as part of the study, we looked at both qualitative and quantitative data. In terms of qualitative data, we did extensive interviews with the large housing authorities, which were HACLA, the Housing Authority of the City LA, and the county's housing authority, which is the Los Angeles County Development Authority, LASA, which is the COC lead agent in Los Angeles County that manages the overall homeless service system. We also interviewed 5 smaller PHAs across Los Angeles County. We've done countless interviews with homeless service providers, both case managers and management at those service providers and frontline staff, and people with lived experience who were using a voucher. We also went to HUD and asked for access to the 50058 data for Los Angeles County PHAs. Many of us on the call are probably familiar with HMIS data. So the HMIS is the Homeless Management Information System. Well, there's another data set that PHAs use, and they use it through a form called the 50058 form. Housing authority staff complete this form when a voucher is issued or given to a household, and when that household successfully leases up a unit. This information is then submitted regularly, daily, weekly, biweekly to HUD on a really regular basis. And this is a really important data extract to use to be able to understand lease ups and issuances for people who are using tenant-based vouchers. Next slide. So a little bit more about the 50058 data and this study. This study is among the first to use this data extract from HUD that includes the voucher issuances. So when a household actually gets a voucher in their hand and can go out to the private market to use it, as well as when that household is successfully leases up a unit and where that unit is in the community. This is also one of the first studies to measure success rates separately for people experiencing homelessness in the community compared to other households not experiencing homelessness. Next slide. So I want to review a few things not covered by this study. One is project-based vouchers. These are used extensively in Los Angeles for project-based permanent supportive housing. There is an extensive effort going on in Los Angeles to use project-based vouchers for PSH. And since that would be a study in and of itself, that information and data is excluded from this study. We also, as Christina had said, did not include the emergency housing voucher issued to PHAs in the summer of 2021. This research that we're currently talking about was already underway at that time, and PHAs were just notified about that research as we were doing our data collection and analysis. So emergency housing vouchers are not included in this data. This data analysis also does not include the HMIS data on the vulnerability of people experiencing homelessness who received a voucher. The data analysis and administrative data that we used only has relied on the 50058 data from HUD, although it is a dream of the Abt teams to marry the 50058 data with the HMIS data on people who received a voucher who were experiencing homelessness. This study also only looks at up until the point people who successfully leased a unit using a voucher. So we were not able to look at the continued stability after people experiencing homelessness leased up with this voucher. Next slide. So I'm going to give a little bit of a foundational knowledge about how Vouchers are used for people experiencing homelessness in LA, and the entities involved and who assists people experiencing homelessness using their voucher. So generally, PHAs do not receive enough budget from the US Congress to serve everyone who is eligible for a voucher. Instead, the public housing authorities create preferences, and that means that they decide who goes to the top of the waiting list and gets the next available voucher. Most PHAs in LA County have some sort of preference for people experiencing homelessness in the community. The Housing Authority of the City of LA, also known as HACLA, has a set aside of a specific number of vouchers for people experiencing homelessness. The Los Angeles County Development Authority has committed, or LACTA, has committed to issuing 100% of its turnover vouchers to people experiencing homelessness. This each year amounts to a substantial number of vouchers going to people who are experiencing homelessness in the community. Next slide. So this shows the data breakdown of the issuance of vouchers overall and the issuance of vouchers to people experiencing homelessness. Again, please recognize that the data is from 2016 through 2020, so before the pandemic and before the EHVs hit the system. So you can see overall, the data is broken up. The first bar is all public housing authorities, and you can see roughly across LA County housing authorities during this time period, roughly half, a little less than half, went to people experiencing homelessness. And that has kind of carried through HACLA, which is the Housing Authority of the City of LA, LACTA, the Los Angeles County Development Authority, as well as the City of Long Beach, a little bit less than half in most of these cases. And then the final row is all PHAs excluding those last three, and there's quite a bit proportionally less going to people experiencing homelessness. Next slide. So how do vouchers get to people experiencing homelessness? So we'll talk about the two largest PHAs. For HACLA and LACTA, they have contracts with the LA County Department of Health Services, the LA County Department of Mental Health, and homeless service providers across LA County. So the PHAs commit to using available vouchers or turnover vouchers to the clients of these organizations when they become available. The organizations, DHS, DMH, and the homeless service providers then rely on their internal client lists or ask LAHSA's coordinated entry system leads for referrals of people who are next on the list, people experiencing homelessness. So HACLA and LACTA have contracts with these agencies, and then these agencies identify the clients who are next on the waiting list. Once a client has been identified, a case manager works with the client to do two really critical things. One is to acquire the necessary documents needed for the voucher application. This is the ID cards, the social security cards, homelessness verification, income determination, all kind of the necessary paperwork to support that application for eligibility. And then also the case manager helps to complete and submit a voucher application. We know notoriously that this application is really complex. It's very paperwork heavy. And so really having someone help a client walk through this process is really critical for the success of using this resource. Next slide. So just a little closer look at who receives these vouchers. Between 2016 and 2020, more than 2/3 of new vouchers, around 71%, were issued to homeless households by the Los Angeles PHAs consisting of one person. And this finding is consistent with the last two point-in-time counts in Los Angeles, where the majority of people who were experiencing homelessness were doing so as a single adult. Next slide. Looking at it, looking at the breakdown by race and ethnicity, more than half of households experiencing homelessness issued vouchers by LA PHAs between 2016 and 2020 were Black, around a quarter were Hispanic, and then less than 20% were white non-Hispanic, 1% Indigenous non-Hispanic, 1% Asian non-Hispanic, and 1% other race non-Hispanic. This is consistent with the disproportionate share of people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles region who are Black. So we're seeing that in this data as well. For those of you familiar with the 2022 point in time count for Los Angeles, where Latinos now are making up around 44% of people experiencing homelessness, if you ran this exact data analysis using the issuance data from 2021 or 2022, this chart or this bar graph may look a little different, considering the rise in Latino homelessness in Los Angeles. Next slide. So in thinking about the voucher issuance and housing search, so once a client's application is complete and approved, the PHA issues the household a voucher. That is when that household can start looking for a rental unit in Los Angeles. The voucher tells the household where they can look for housing, where there might be certain geographical bounds, depending on the 19 PHAs agreements between cities and counties, how much rent the voucher will support. So the total rent, including the household share. Next slide. So help finding a rental unit and leasing up is extremely important in Los Angeles, given the tight rental market and low vacancy rates. Case managers help their clients find housing based on personal connections with landlords that they have, either that former clients or current clients are using, or other connections they may have in the community. There is an organization in Los Angeles called PATH, and they have a dedicated program called the Lease Up Program, which recruits landlords to come into a pool of available units and reserve that unit for a period of time for someone who is experiencing homeless to use a rental subsidy with. And then, of course, we heard case managers say that they often rely just on online search platforms such as Zillow, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. Landlords also in Los Angeles may be offered financial incentives besides the rent. Measure H, which is the dedicated ballot measure dedicated for homelessness services and housing in Los Angeles County, created the Housing Incentive Program. And this was a program to offer financial incentives to landlords across LA County who accepted a voucher. Next slide. So as I had noted, we talked as part of our data collection process with people who experienced homelessness and were using a voucher. So this is a quote from one of those people who participated in our interviews, and they talked about the barriers applying for housing units. They said, "It was hard becoming document ready. I didn't have a rent history or a credit score. I would have had a voucher assistance, and they would have needed those things to show that I would be a respectable tenant." Next slide. So this slide shows the success rates for new households issued vouchers during that time period of 2016 through 2020. This table is broken up on the left-hand side by the PHA's name. The first row is all LA County PHAs, and then the next two are HACLA and LACTA. The fourth is the City of Long Beach, and then the last row is all PHAs excluding those top three. The far right-hand columns, the middle column shows the voucher lease-up rate for homeless households. The final column shows other households who were successful in leasing up. So the far column is households who are not experiencing homelessness. The overall success rate for people experiencing homelessness across Los Angeles County's all PHAs was about 65%. For other households, those not experiencing homelessness, it was around 61%. You can see that HACLA, LACTA, and the City of Long Beach, their rates of success are either equal to or greater than people from other households also leasing up. This might be surprising given the qualitative data from the interviews that we heard from service providers and people experiencing homelessness that discussed the really challenging rental market, the really challenging process of getting paperwork, getting documents ready, getting the application in and submitted. But we at Abt, at the research team, really kind of think about three factors that really influence the success rate. One is the motivation of people experiencing homelessness to become stably housed, especially in Los Angeles, where we know the majority of people who are experiencing homelessness are doing so in unsheltered settings. So really about that motivation, that driving factor of getting off the streets and getting into housing. The second is the assistance that we know that case managers from homeless service providers help people and assist the clients, filling out their applications, going to all the different entities to get the necessary documents, and then submitting the applications to the housing authorities. So really the assistance from the case managers is really critical to use this resource successfully. And then finally, the financial incentives offered to landlords so they're more willing to rent to someone who has experienced homelessness. And just thinking about the landlord community in Los Angeles, and how tight it is and how little vacancy there is. If you have someone who may be presenting the same on paper, but one person is coming with a financial incentive of a couple $1,000s compared to another person, a landlord might be more willing to offer their housing to people experiencing homelessness because of that financial incentive. Next slide. This is a quote from one of our interview participants. They say, "Joe, the case manager, is really awesome. I've never had to call anyone else above him. He always gets back to me, even when he's on vacation. He bent over backwards to support me during the COVID pandemic." Next slide. So as I had previously said, we looked at the race and ethnicity breakdowns for people experiencing homelessness and their success in leasing up housing. So this table shows the racial ethnic categories on the left-hand side, and then the second column and the fourth column shows the lease up for different household types. The middle column with the red circle around it is for households experiencing homelessness, and then the far right column is lease up for other households. What we can see is that Black and Hispanic households are leasing up at a higher percentage rate for people experiencing homelessness compared to other households not experiencing homelessness. And then we can actually see the inverse effect for white non-Hispanic households. White non-Hispanic households are leasing up at around a 60% for people experiencing homelessness, while people not experiencing homelessness is around 68%. Anecdotally, if we look at this, when talking to both case managers and people experiencing homelessness and homeless service system leaders, what we're really seeing here is the housing discrimination, what's happening in the housing market, and how for people who are working with case managers and working with, being able to take a financial incentive with them, it's really helping them find housing successfully in the market. Next slide. So how long does it take to find that housing once a household has a voucher in hand? Typically, PHAs give households around 3 months to find a housing unit and then submit a request for lease approval. This often can come with various extensions if the household is believed to be actively searching for housing in the community. The table underneath the second bullet shows out the average and median days for lease up for homeless households and other households. The average time between issuance of a voucher and lease up for people experiencing homelessness is about 122 days, or about 4 months. However, in our analysis, many households who are experiencing homelessness often needed more than 180 days or 6 months to find a unit. And this just, kind of shows you the extent of the challenges in the Los Angeles housing market to successfully rent a unit. Next slide. So where are vouchers used? This map is a map of LA County. Los Angeles County, within the homeless service system, but in other social services as well, are divided into what is known as SPAs, or service provider areas, service provision areas. And there are 8 SPAs across Los Angeles County. What we did here is we mapped out Los Angeles County by the SPAs. So you can see the west is really kind of Spa 5, which is like Venice Beach, Malibu, kind of in the beach communities. Spa 4 is metro area, so the city of LA, the metro area. San Fernando Valley is Spa 2, the San Gabriel Valley, Spa 3. Spa 6 is kind of the historic South Central LA. Spa 8 is South Beach, that's where Long Beach, San Pedro are. And then Spa 7 is the east side of LA. So what we did here is you can see the number of new vouchers leased to homeless households, and that's that blue shading. So the darker the blue on the map is the kind of concentration, the higher concentration of vouchers that are used for homeless households. And then we've also applied the poverty greater than 30% are kind of those red hash marks. And then if you're seeing a dark red, you are seeing 30% or more of poverty and a large proportion of voucher lease ups. So you can see that the red is really coming through in Spa 6. So you see a lot of lease ups of vouchers in the South Central area of South LA, as well as in the Long Beach area of Spa 8. Next slide. So we talked a lot with people experiencing homelessness about, finding a unit in LA, the challenging market, what type of options were available for them in the housing inventory. Two participants said, when I was told, hey, we have a place for you, I didn't want to live in that location because of gangs, drug dealers, and that kind of thing. But when you don't have a choice, you don't have a choice. The availability of units is in the ghetto, which leaves no choice. The second individual said, should I move to the outskirts of LA? But where I was connected was in the community in South LA area. And we do have a lot of community advocacy, and our networks are there. It doesn't mean I don't want to be safe. I want to be able to walk and exercise in my neighborhood without a gun, without pepper spray or a taser. I want to be able to do this where I live. Next slide. So we also looked at how much vouchers for people experiencing homelessness cost compared to other households. And I want to caveat this slide by saying that this cost data only looks at the rental assistance payments paid by the housing authorities. So it doesn't take into consideration other cost drivers such as payment standards, household size differences, variation in rental costs across the Los Angeles areas, and the time and labor of PHA staff. Also, the cost of a voucher really depends on two things: household size and the rent of a unit, and the household's incomes. People with lived experience and people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles largely do so in one-person households, and they get a one-bedroom voucher. The difference in voucher cost by the size of the unit is substantial in LA. However, you kind of also have to think of people with experiencing homelessness may have lower incomes than other households. So that 30% difference that the household pay may be lower for people experiencing homelessness because they're not bringing as much income into their application for a housing voucher. So overall, the cost of serving households experiencing homelessness is only slightly greater than the cost of serving other households. It's a difference of about $29 on average across all PHAs, but this pattern is not consistent across the PHAs. HACLA, which is the Housing Authority of the City of LA, and Long Beach pay more subsidy for households who are not experiencing homelessness before they leased up with a voucher. HACLA pays $24 more, and Long Beach pays $125 more. LACTA, on the other hand, pays more, around $78 for people who were experiencing homelessness before they leased up with vouchers. Next slide. So, and this is just a table breaking out where you can see all PHAs, HACLA, LACLA, and Long Beach. The difference is the purple bar is the average HAP cost for homeless households, and then the teal bar is the average HAP cost for other households. Next slide. So future considerations for Los Angeles. One is thinking about how federal vouchers are used and how much of a dent they make into get people into a permanent housing subsidy and stable housing in the Los Angeles community. So the number one kind of consideration that we came from this research is advocating for more federal vouchers in Los Angeles. Also thinking about investing in efforts to increase the ability of voucher holders to rent in housing where they want and where they want and need to be. So thinking about how to combat housing discrimination and educate landlords on the state's source of income discrimination legislation. And then for those landlords who are not following that legislation, how to enforce the standard. And then finally, continuing to invest in staff dedicated to helping households become document ready, applying for public benefits and helping them through the voucher application process. And then once the voucher is issued, helping them in the housing search process. Next slide. So we're going to turn to a discussion with panelists. I'm wondering if we can pull up the poll that we discussed, asking all of our attendees before launching into our panel discussion.
Sure. I'm launching the word cloud poll. You should see that on your side panel. And you can answer that poll. I'm going to make sure that that's open for everyone. You can answer that poll with a single word answer, and we should see it populate.
Great. So the question that I want to ask all the participants that are on the webinar is, what's your community's largest challenge in people using vouchers that are experiencing homelessness or other types of rental assistance? It doesn't necessarily have to be a federal tenant-based voucher, but what are the biggest challenges your community face? You can enter one-word answers and we will then be able to see a word cloud appear. And this is really going to lead the questions with the panelists. And as Lauren had said on the chat button, please enter into you should see a Slido pop up and you can enter your answers there. And we'll just give it a minute.
Nichole, would you like me to share my screen so that we can have the word cloud up larger?
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Sure.
Okay. So we see availability and affordability being two of the largest, housing scarcity, low vacancy, fair market rent, landlords unwilling, mental health services, landlord scarcity, access, availability, credit and references. Yep, this is, I think, what we're seeing across the country. So thank you so much, everyone. And you know what? We'll make this word cloud available as a picture when we post the slides and the presentation, because I think it's a really good visual to lead us into our panel discussion. So panelists, feel free to take yourself off mute and join us on camera. First, I'm going to introduce our three experts who are able to join us today on behalf of the Abt team. Thank you so much for being able to join us. I'm going to read short bios about each of the panelists, and then we're going to open it up for a really great discussion. So you guys have met Christina, who provided the intro. Christina Miller serves as the Senior Advocacy Officer for the Conrad and Hilton Foundation Homelessness Initiative. In this position, she supports the foundation's advocacy strategies focused on ending homelessness for vulnerable populations across LA County. Before coming to the foundation, Christina served as the Senior Policy Fellow for California State for the National Alliance to End Homelessness and worked with California state government to advance solutions to homelessness in California. Previously, Christina was Deputy Mayor of City Homelessness Initiatives for Los Angeles Mayor Garcetti. There, she was responsible for overseeing the city's response and policy development to homeless strategy. Christina also spent a decade tackling the issues of homelessness, poverty, and adequate mental health in the nonprofit sector through direct service, policy, and advocacy work. She worked at LA Family Housing, a low-income housing developer and lead service provider in San Fernando Valley. We're also joined with Tracy Jones. She is the Senior Vice President of the Housing Choice Voucher Program at Atlanta Housing, where she served 2 tenures totaling 12 years. Tracy currently oversees a $130 million budget, which provides housing assistance to more than 11,000 families. Under Tracy's leadership, the Housing Choice Voucher Program developed 5 new housing programs that address the needs of homeless and at-risk families and has housed more than 1,200 families using the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Tracy's housing career spans 34 years, garnering an abundance of affordable housing experience. She's provided oversight for more than 6,000 units while working for companies such as Arco Management, McCormick Barron, Lane Company, the Integral Group, National Church Residencies, and the housing authorities of Atlanta, Albany, Columbus, Savannah, New Orleans, Louisiana, Washington, D.C., Birmingham, and Newark. And finally, Peter Lynn. Peter Lynn has worked in housing and homelessness for the past 20 years. He serves as the Chief Program Officer for the new King County Regional Homelessness Authority, where he helped design and lead the region's successful emergency housing voucher program. He's previously led the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority for 5 years through 2019, a period of tremendous change for the lead agency of the nation's largest continuum of care. Prior to LAHSA, he's directed the Housing Choice Voucher Program for the Housing Authority of the City of LA, doubling the size of HACLA's program for people experiencing homelessness to more than 14,000 units, and has directed the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development's Section 8 program. So thank you all for joining us today. When I say we are surrounded by decades of expertise, that is being humble. So really, really appreciate your time, your energy, and your experience on this webinar today. So first, I really want to open it up to Tracy and Peter to really just talk about your programs, talk about what you're seeing in your communities. You're both in metro areas in different parts of the country. So Tracy, do you want to talk a little bit about Atlanta Housing right now?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for receiving me and giving me the opportunity to talk about one of the programs that I love, which is the Housing Choice Voucher Program for Atlanta Housing. And I love this program so much because we give families the opportunity to find housing through federal assistance and city funding. But more so, in my role, I have been given the authority to develop programs for the homelessness, for homeless families. I've been able to expand that platform, and I think that gives me more joy than anything, and to come up with programs that are defined and geared towards families in need or sleeping on the street, under the bridge, single families who are in transitional programs that need the next step. Atlanta Housing has been instrumental in developing these programs, and I have led that charge since I was promoted to the Senior Vice President for Atlanta Housing. And so I've been focusing on this for the last 5 or 6 years, and through this we created this program called Haven, and our team that works in this program is called Team Haven. And why this is so special, because Atlanta Housing, you know, we are probably known as one of the top authorities in the country. A lot of folks come to us about different things, but being able to focus on how to solve, or at least help, we can't solve, but just take a little notch out of the homeless challenges that we face in this city has been rewarding, not only for our agency, but for our families. And through Team Haven, we're able to establish a focused, direct process on families who are homeless. When you work through the Housing Choice Voucher Program, you're on this waiting list. Our waiting list has over 20,000 families on it. And if you're homeless, You cannot wait to be pulled off a waiting list that has 20, 30,000 families on it. With the Haven program, we work with the COC and other city partners, and we receive direct referrals from them. And what they do is they do the pre-screening, they basically do all the work, and they make the referral of the family, and they are feeders to the different programs that we set up. And so when those families come to us, we do an expedited process. So those families are not caught up in queue. We immediately take those families, we do intake, and we give them a voucher, even before we determine eligibility. And so that family has a advanced opportunity to look for housing, and they don't get caught up with the other families who are searching, who are in the same amount of need, but the homeless families are our focus at this point. And so working with referring agencies and the COC, we have been very successful in getting families off the street. Before COVID hit and before we hit this rental market challenge, we were able to get families housed anywhere between 30 and 40 days after issuing the vouchers. It's a little slower now, but still they get the direct impact of the staff. We assist them. They don't have to go through any process. They don't have to wait in line, basically, and we're able to push them through. And so what the Team Haven is, they go from admission to lease up in a very expedited time frame, and they get the services they need. And once they're housed, the partnering companies that we work with provide case management. And so we really have worked with the Atlanta public school system, because there's over 2,500 families just sitting on their rolls that are homeless. And so we provide vouchers for those families. We provide, we created some programs for working closely with Grady. It's one of the largest hospitals probably in the country, but definitely in the city of Atlanta. Homeless families use Grady as a shelter. And so we developed a program where we said, hey, we'll work with your integrated group. We have these vouchers. You get them out of the Grady Hospital system. We get them into housing. We get them to give them support services. We created, when the COVID hit, we worked directly with the COC, and we created this program called COVID Response. And we gave that agency 100 vouchers, and they literally went on the street. This was before EHB came along. They went along the streets and they pulled people off the streets, put them in hotels, and it went from hotels to permanent housing. And this is some of the innovative ways we have worked with our partners in the city of Atlanta to how can we help? And this is one way we're helping. In a couple of weeks, we're going to our board to present a program for single families who are transitioning out of transitional housing, who have been homeless. And so they've gone through this comprehensive program, and now they're ready for permanent housing. So we will be offering 50 vouchers for that program. And so I've been really excited. I just was appointed to the COC board last month. So now I'm a board member of the COC, and now I'm really getting to be in the middle, in the mix of how do we solve this problem. And so I'm just excited about the programs that we do here at Atlanta Housing and having the ability to kind of work through the homelessness platform and just bring some of my innovative thoughts, because I can sit all day and think of things, but being able to have the opportunity to bring the program forward has just been rewarding and successful for us. And so this is just one of the many programs at Atlanta Housing and that we're very proud of. And so that's basically my job in a nutshell, other than providing oversight to the Housing Choice Voucher program that we do house about 11,000 families in this program. And 1,200 to 1,300 are those families who have come through our Haven program.
Thank you so much, Tracy. And Peter, do you want to talk a little bit about King County and your experience up there?
Good morning, folks. It's still morning here for us. Peter Lynn, I use he, him pronouns, and serve now as the Chief Program Officer for the KCRHA, which is a new public entity. We're the lead for the continuum of care for the Seattle-King County continuum, and we have the privilege to work with two very large moving to work agencies, public housing agencies. King County and Seattle Housing Authorities are both moving to work, so they have a lot of flexibility, and they have used that flexibility to support moving people out of homelessness, which has been a really strong benefit to the continuum. also was very excited to participate in this panel, having led LASA for 5 years and also HACLA for 7 years, the HACLA Section 8 program for 7 years prior to that. So this is a topic very, very near to my heart. And having worked very closely in the LA market and looking at the experience, obviously, one of the things that we see in rental markets and the experience of tenant-based vouchers is that it does shift over time. There are, markets tighten, they loosen. I remember when we had the experience of the 08 recession in LA and a huge amount of movement out of the rental market. There was a lot of the vacancy rates skyrocketed as people doubled up. And suddenly we had a much greater attendance at our landlord briefing. Suddenly it seemed very appealing to a landlord to have a durable rental subsidy. And so that kind of shift can happen very quickly. And also just looking at the results of this study, the lease-up success rates are lower now based on the study from when I was running the Section 8 program. And I think we definitely have seen the market tighten, and that it's gotten more challenging for households to lease up in the as we see in this result, and also from looking at the experience with EHV, it is a tighter market now, and it's a harder one in Los Angeles. And I think our experience in King County is that this is a low vacancy rate market, but there's still room to move, and the tenant-based voucher is the sort of lead tool to move the vast majority of people out of the experience of homelessness into stable housing. I think that if there were sort of one silver bullet, which everybody looks for, it would be a tenant-based voucher at eligible, at income eligibility. That would be sort of answer. Obviously, we don't print money at that level, but it would be the experience that the nation had. The very rapid uptake of the emergency housing voucher program demonstrates the effectiveness, even in a really challenging market like the pandemic market that we saw. I think that's one of the things that's really exciting. When I was at HACLA, I think we worked diligently with our continuum of care partners and with service providers like LA Family Housing, where Christina was at that time, to build out programming that really met people where they're at and what the needs were. So we built out a set aside limited preference for people experiencing homelessness who might not need the long-term durable supportive services of a PSH level assistance, but that could stabilize. And we put thousands of vouchers into that program to ensure that we could partner with community-based service providers like LA Family Housing to get the people that they're working with connected to a voucher. We didn't have any supportive services for that, so really we're working with folks who they're working with and could nominate. And we used a similar sort of approach in addressing our EHV program. So we talked a lot with our partners with lived experience, and particularly guidance from our Lived Experience Coalition. And part of that said, ensure that we are working with folks who are unsheltered and really getting the vouchers as far as possible to people who would not otherwise be served. They also recommended that we build out a moving on program to assist people with relocating out of PSH once they'd stabilized their lives. This is a program that we had done very effectively in LA, using vouchers to allow people from continuum of care based PSH to move on into community and to free up both a high impact resource for people who need that level of support, and to allow people to integrate into community where they chose, using that housing choice voucher. And so there was a good partnership there. And we also partnered with our county health agency to build out a tenant-based supportive housing program that would just add depth to that capacity. And I think we have a very, very sizable continuum of care funded tenant-based supportive housing program, but using vouchers, we expanded that quite dramatically in LA. And I think that was a really powerful addition to the tools that we have to address all of the array of the needs of people experiencing homelessness. So I think this study demonstrates the effectiveness of that, demonstrates that, because I think one of the challenges that some communities face as they're reflecting on the public policy choices of where to apply their voucher assistance. Do you use it for working families? Do you use it for people on the wait list? Do you use it to assist people out of homelessness? I think one of the trade-offs that has been articulated that I've heard is that if you assist more family, households that have very, very low incomes, like people experiencing homelessness, you can't assist as many people. And I think one of the findings that I was pleased to see was that the cost impact is not very great, and it does not diminish your reach to assist households out of homelessness using this tool. I was really excited to see this study, and very happy to participate in the discussion today.
Thanks so much, Peter. So this is a question for everyone, and Christina, I encourage you to draw from your experience at LA Family Housing and with the mayor's office and kind of all the hats that you've worn over the past decade. But, thinking about finding housing in a community, we've seen from the word cloud that, finding units, finding vacant units, finding affordable vacant units, getting landlords kind of into the program, recruiting landlords is one of the biggest challenges in using this housing resource successfully in a community. So I'm interested to hear from the three panelists, like what you guys specifically use as tools, as resources on the ground for kind of case managers. Like, what do the case managers have at their fingertips to help clients navigate this process? What type of incentives or programs do you have for landlords that you've seen been successful in getting landlords into the program and keeping landlords in the program? So I'm just going to open it up on that question for anyone who wants to jump in.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, and maybe before I even talk about that question, I just want to say I love the word cloud activity, and I think anyone who is on the ground doing this work, when they saw the words that really popped out, you're sitting there thinking, of course, like you know this, subjectively, from your everyday experience that those are the major barriers, and you've probably been saying it till you're blue in the face that these are the challenges that people want to go inside, they want to get into permanent housing, and they are faced, even when they have, what is known as like the golden ticket, like they've got their voucher and they just can't make it over the finish line because of those barriers. I think what's so important about this study is that you've been able to put data behind what people are subjectively feeling every day in the field. And I just want to underscore like how important that is as a policy advocacy tool, because anyone who's meeting with a policymaker, 9 times out of 10, they're like, sure, that's how you feel, that's what you think, show me the data. So I just want to encourage anyone who is out there advocating around these points that to use this study as a data base and a research base for what you're advocating for. And I just want to also build off Peter's comment around the sort of administrative cost of helping homeless households. I love the study that was able to demystify the sort of cost differential between helping homeless households as well as the lease up rate of homeless households. Because again, sometimes things just become, myth just becomes sort of fact if you say it enough. And I think in LA particularly, people would say, well, homeless households are only leasing up at like a 25% lease up rate, or it's so expensive to administer vouchers to homeless households. And so I want to say again how pleased I am that this study actually sort of debunks and demystifies and allows us to use data, use information that is objective to sort of push the truth in terms of what's happening on the ground with tenant-based vouchers. And then now I'll answer your question, Nichole, and stop talking. But I think landlord incentives, there's been a lot of different tools or a lot of different ways in which landlord incentive programs have been structured. And I know there's been a question in the chat about what's been the most effective. I mean, it's a huge carrot to say to a landlord, if you work with us in our program and the program participant, we can offer twice like the maximum security, legal security deposit. We also there's also a common practice in LA where you might have a unit mitigation fund. Like, should there be extensive damage, should there be issues that go above and beyond what a security deposit can pay for, there's like a mitigation fund that landlords might have access to. But I think one of the most powerful landlord incentive tools used in LA is a holding fee, right? So we know, like, even in its most efficient process, right? Like, there will be maybe a month or two sometimes longer, depending on how an inspection goes, where that unit might sit vacant while the person is getting there, while it's getting approved. And that for some landlords is just not a financial hit they can take, that they can't, so in order to incentivize the use of the voucher program, we've been able to use holding fees to say, you're not going to lose any money on this unit while it is going through the housing authority inspection process. We're going to give you rent as a holding fee to sort of keep that landlord in working with the program. I think what's important is to track just how much money we are spending on vacant units as a strategy. I think we just need to be careful, because if the inspection process goes on too long, there really is like a cost benefit analysis to, paying for a vacant unit where that money could actually go towards helping someone who is in housing. So just some tools I know are used here in LA. And Tracy or Peter, feel free to jump in as well.
We use some of the same or similar incentives. We have the holding fee, which is new for us. We just started utilizing the holding fee this year, part of last year. We do have what we call a leasing incentive fee, where we cover security deposit, application fees. But for our landlords, we have expanded our incentives. We have rent boost for landlords that if they provide newer units or newer utilities and, the ACs and different installation in the units, we will give them a rent boost. We have a first-time pass incentive. So if the unit passed the first time, because if the units are failing, it's delaying the families from moving in. So we give a first-time pass to landlords who can pass the first time. We have same thing as you call it the mitigation. We call it property protection, where if a participant destroys a unit, we will reimburse the landlord up to a certain amount. So we also have a landlord advisory group that we meet with once a quarter. And they literally give us a lot of information about what's happening on the ground, because we're providing a service and we're really not out there as much as we would love to be, but they're our eyes and our ears, and they're keeping us abreast to changes. And we adhere to a lot of the recommendations they make. We have a landlord referral fee. We have an annual symposium. So these are things we do to attract landlords, also to keep them with us. We have housing navigators, housing counselors to assist the families, but also to assist our landlords. And we have completely gone 100% electronic, where we have a portal where landlords absolutely do not have to come into the office. They didn't have to come in the office before COVID. And we continue to expand that platform so that our landlords are doing business very quickly, getting what they're looking for, rent increases, when's my next inspection, did I pass? Even if they want to file a claim or a lease, we call it a violation against a family, they can do all those things online, and it has really improved customer service. And so we're constantly thinking about how do we improve. A year and a half ago, we implemented what we call our green program. We work with Home Depot and Lowe's, and we offer like a discounted program. So it's like a rewards program for the Housing Choice Voucher landlords, and they get 10 to 15% off different things. So we're always kind of trying to be innovative and figure out how can we pull on landlords as well as keep them on our programs. So those are some of the things we do. I think I got 5 or 6 pages of things we do, but those are highlighted, most used ones.
I think that one of the resources that that I would like to lift up that we have in the Seattle-King County Continuum of Care is a nonprofit called Housing Connector that has built a deep set of relationships with landlords and offers up a damage mitigation fund, but and as well as some holding fees, but also just like is that voice for landlords and for connecting with the community of landlords who, there are a lot of prejudices against rental assistance in the marketplace. That is something that we I think we saw considerably in LA, and I thought that one of the details from the report flagged that a very small number of landlords actually will accept rental assistance. And I think that despite the fact that many communities in Washington State in 2018 passed a law to forbidding the discrimination against source of income, including housing assistance payments as covered under that. It is still prevalent in the marketplace that landlords will discourage applicants who have rental assistance and vouchers, and I think that the capacity of Housing Connector to speak to landlords and to address the concerns that they have and to meet them where they're at, I think is really powerful, and to offer the incentives of, we will work with you if problems emerge. We will work with you and the housing authorities. We will work with you and the tenants. And I think that is a non-financial but very powerful incentive for landlords to participate in. And they do obviously see the issues of the expansion of the crisis of homelessness that we're facing particularly on the West Coast, but across the country. And I do feel that folks want to help, but they're business people. They want to protect their investments. They want to protect their income, and the damage that can emerge is considerable. There is a state damage mitigation fee that was enacted with that law, and there's a program, but I've heard anecdotally from landlords that it's not particularly user-friendly. So one of the things that Housing Connector offers is the capacity to engage there. I do feel like it is important to be thoughtful about the way that incentives are constructed so that you do not disincentivize other applicants. And I think that one of the things that you mentioned was that the success rates for, among the impacts of the success rates for people experiencing homelessness and utilizing their vouchers, the access to a landlord incentive does put them at a relatively competitive advantage to people who do not have that. So you want to make sure that you're not, negatively impacting other folks, and that I think is one of the challenges in thoughtful public policies. We construct the kinds of incentives that are meaningful to help ensure that we can get utilization for this, for vouchers, but not negatively impact other households. Similar to the kinds of public policy issues that we have with rent reasonableness. We really want to make sure that we are in the marketplace and offering a competitive rent, but not inflating that rent so that we are negatively impacting everybody else. And those are really important public policy considerations as you formulate a program. But it is important, particularly I think on the damage mitigation side. That is a real concern, and landlords have insurance, but drawing on their insurance raises the rest of their costs, and so I think those are helps to insurance acceptance.
Absolutely. And Peter, you bring up a really good point in this competitiveness, not even amongst just people experiencing homelessness who might have access to different sort of incentive funds that come with rental assistance compared to other households in the private market who don't have access, but even between different sorts of rental assistance funds that are administered across the community. You have different programs within PHAs, you have different programs within the COC, you have other programs that might be funded by other funders in the community, and thinking about kind of the different advantage levels that different people at risk and economically vulnerable people have to entering stable housing is really important as a policy decision.
And we certainly don't want to compete against ourselves or pit programs against each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. So one question I want to follow up on, and Peter, you just hinted at it when talking about legal protections, kind of known as source of income discrimination protections in the community. This is something that came to life in California over the past couple of years, both statewide and then in the city and county of Los Angeles, is the source of income protection that really prohibits landlords from discriminating against voucher holders or any other person who's coming into a rental situation with a rental subsidy. And I'm interested kind of across the board from the three panelists, does your community, Peter, you said the state of Washington has a source of income protection that extends to voucher holders. California does, as I just said. And one of the things that we heard in the research, especially from case managers who are really kind of working with their clients, hitting the ground, looking for units, is that landlords are still discriminating against voucher holders. You will see signs on Zillow, on Craigslist, no Section 8, no rental assistance programs. And the case managers are kind of at a loss of what to do when they face that situation. Over the past couple of years, there hasn't been strong enforcement across the state of California because there's no real enforcement mechanism that has really taken shape locally. But also kind of thinking about that reputational capital that case managers are building with community members, building with landlords. They don't want to burn bridges, because what if landlord X has a friend landlord Y and they might take, so they don't really want to burn bridges and report people. But at the same time, how do you kind of systematically address housing discrimination? So I'm interested kind of across the three panelists if this is something you're seeing in the community. And I know, Christina, this is something that the foundation has been thinking a lot about.
Yeah, you raised such excellent points, Nichole, and also just really important points of the user experience on the ground of case managers who may or may not feel empowered to address the issue or may not know where to go to receive supports. So I think there are some good faith efforts out there to ensure enforcement of what's known here in California as SB 329, which is the state law passed in 2019 by then State Senator Holly Mitchell, who's now an LA County supervisor. But for the challenges that you named are real, and there's also I'm not sure that there's widespread knowledge that people are even engaging in an illegal practice. I think some landlords just actually don't know it's illegal to say no, we don't take Section 8. It's just been such a common practice for so long that there is this kind of widespread community cultural shift we need to start going in that it just makes it more of a regular cultural norm that's not allowed. It's not okay to say no Section 8. I think a couple other challenges are it's even when there is pretty solid material evidence that a landlord is engaged in this discriminatory practice. These cases are very, very hard to litigate. It's just challenging to win. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And I'll say, in fact, here in LA, the LA Housing Department, which is an LA City department, has partnered with Housing Rights Center, a local legal aid organization, to find impact litigation cases and to not start with litigation, but start with education, so landlords understand what they are or are not following in terms of law. I know that the public housing authorities also send out letters when provider agencies will report that they're receiving a declination of a tenant's application based solely on them having a Section 8 voucher. So then the housing authority will send a strongly worded letter to say, hey, what you're doing is illegal. You need to cease and desist this practice immediately. The foundation, after your report was finalized, Nichole, the foundation pursued a grant with Western Center on Law and Poverty to hire a housing attorney to further their housing rights framework that they're involved in to continue to pursue impact litigation and also to provide TA and education to both providers and the landlord community. So it's, again, this sort of cultural shift to what our common practices are as a community. So I think we're heading in the right direction. I think it's going to take a concerted effort to make sure that providers feel supported and empowered to confront the illegal practices without harming relationships. And they need that cover from government, right? So hopefully we're kind of tackling it from both ends there.
Well, from the Atlanta side, in Georgia, the former Mayor Lance Bottom enacted an ordinance just for this type of program. It was passed by City Council, and landlords immediately barked back. It was newspaper articles where they were not going to do it. We can't make them do it. And when the housing attorneys looked at it, it really had no teeth. And what we needed was a state-led initiative to enact this law, to enact the law. So as we stand today in Georgia, we don't have state support for this action. We have a City of Atlanta action, but it's not really moving. And so it's very challenging to even approach a landlord about the ordinance, because to them, it doesn't have any teeth, it doesn't have any legal legs, and they're just not trying to adhere or even assist us. And we're trying to penetrate markets within the city of Atlanta, of course, very high-end units, to give our families more choices. And we can't even use that language, because they already have armed themselves to understand that really you have no teeth here. And until it's a state, ordinance or state law, it's just no hope for our families. So we do the best we can to negotiate with landlords, but this is something that's really challenging for us. And some of the properties, some families have gone as far as to sue fair housing claims, and then you find another way that the property owners then discriminate against the families. Their credit, where the credit wasn't an issue in the past, now credit is a challenge. And so they use other tactics and tools if they can't get around the ordinance. So it's challenging. And case managers, housing navigators, as well as practitioners of the program, we're kind of just, what do we do? Because if we can get this turned over, we'll have something in our arsenal to assist our families in getting housed. And right now we don't have it.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think it's a really, really important issue, and perhaps there's federal advocacy that can be done for some sort of like wide sweeping federal law, so it's sort of adopted nationally. I mean, I'll say I think the results that over 65% of homeless households are successfully leasing up and utilizing their vouchers is maybe more than we had thought before in LA. That's still means that 35% of households are not leasing up. And so, to the extent that we can get as close as we can to 100% utilization, this feels like a really important, linchpin in getting there.
Absolutely, I agree.
Great. So one question I want to talk about, as Christina had mentioned, so this study did not explicitly focus on the emergency housing vouchers or the data related to emergency housing vouchers, as it wasn't available yet. But I'd love to hear a little bit from Tracy and Peter about the use of EHVs in your community. I think across the country, there's been really great success stories and some stories of really challenging environments to use the EHVs in. And some of those challenges vary depending on the community. So I'd love to just kind of turn a little bit to the EHVs and hear about both Atlanta and King County's experience using them.
Okay, in Atlanta, we received a very small amount of emergency housing vouchers. We were awarded 202 vouchers to utilize within the city of Atlanta. Out the gate, we had a challenge with trying to utilize those vouchers. And the biggest challenge was, or still is we had to work directly with the COC. And the COC used bridge housing as the referral base to utilize the emergency housing vouchers. So bridge housing or rapid rehousing, or they have all kind of names. These are families who are housed. And so when you ask them and say, hey, we have a voucher for you, they're housed under city funding or some other federal rental program. But when now you try to move them from a unit that they're comfortable, they've been there for a year, and they came off the street, and now you're telling them, hey, we got a voucher for you, you have to start this process over. They literally will not move. And so most of those families, which I just got a report today, 112 of those are in housing and will not move. So 50% of our vouchers are kind of locked down on families who are just kind of very fearful. And so the way the MOU was written, the COC is able to utilize their tiering process to move beds, I should say. So it's been, and it was written in the PHI notice and the regulations around that, the emergency housing vouchers, that the COCs could use these programs, but they're ineffective because those families are housed, and we have people who need the voucher. So it's been very challenging for us to even get to, I think we're at maybe 55 or 56% And it's every day, it's looking at the voucher. Where's the families? How can we find units? Can we move them? Can we port them? Just really working very closely with the COC as well as the families, and kind of letting them know you have case manager, you have a housing navigator, so that they're comfortable knowing that they will not end up back in a chronic homeless situation. So that's our story in Atlanta. And it's been one that's very challenging, and it's hard to get. And I'm on that board now, so it's kind of challenging now to be on the board and say, hey, I need you to look at this voucher in this manner so that we can literally help the people that need that voucher. And so our experience hasn't been the greatest. And when we heard about the vouchers, we were extremely excited. We thought we could lease those families in place and they'll be housed in 90 days. And it is now a year and a half, almost 2 years into the program, and we're still not at almost full capacity and usage of those vouchers. So we're having a little bit of challenge with the program.
Tracy, just a follow-up question on that. The units that these families are currently in, are they private market landlords, or are they dedicated units for your bridge housing program, and so families wouldn't be able to stay in them?
From what I understand, they are some bridge units and then some private market landlords. So the private market, we thought we can convert quickly. And so they don't want to convert. They don't want the voucher. And so we're fighting against everything we know about the stigma tied to a voucher, as well as the bridge housing. And we know those families have to move out, but it's just like, we're here, you're going to have to come pick me up and move me. And that is not, that's unfortunate, because we need to utilize those vouchers. People need help, and we have vouchers sitting here that were unutilized. So we're getting ready to put some fire out there. So they'll be used before September. But it's just been a slow walk, and I wasn't prepared for this. I thought it would just go like that.
So it sounds like kind of almost like a twofold problem, right? So there is some hesitation on the family's part, given their trauma and experience with homelessness, not to move again. But then in places where there are private market landlords, the landlords don't want to accept this voucher for families to lease in place.
Yes.
And Tracy, when you're looking at folks who are in bridge housing, or rapid rehousing, time limited subsidy, all the phrases, are these households who their time is running out, and so transitioning them to a longer term subsidy is sort of the strategy there? And that's one of the ways in which we're using it in LA. But I was just curious, because I think there was a question to us that said, like, well, why can't they just stay in the bridge housing program?
Right. Yes, that is absolutely the case there. Time's running out. And then also the COC wants to free up those units for other people. So if we can get you a voucher, you go to another location, I can now help another person. So the strategy is great. It's just getting the mechanics of it to operate. And at the end of the day, it's the person in the unit that is kind of hesitant, because I probably would be the same way if I was chronically homeless. I'm finally settled for a year, and now you say, let's start again. And so I get it. So we're just trying to find ways and work with the COC to how do we assist these families to moving from the units, have empathy about it, and, reassure them. So our housing counselors usually try to already have a unit, and we'll say, hey, we have this unit here, not steering, but, give them several options where we have found landlords. And that's starting to move them a little bit, but that was the new strategy that we had to move towards. And, that means we're holding on to 5 units, because you can't steer. You have to say, here's an option, here's several options, and, the landlords are willing. So it's working a little bit, but it's still very slow. And we're looking at that timeline of September, and I think we're starting to get, I'm saying me, starting to get a little antsy, because, our goal is not to lose federal funding. And so, but we're working closely together to resolve those families that need the vouchers, and then ensuring that no one's impacted.
Absolutely. Peter, do you want to talk a little bit about King County?
So we got a pretty sizable allocation in King County, 1,300 vouchers across the 3 PHAs, and we worked very closely. I will say that now I'm on the COC side. I was very grateful for the fact that the PIH notice require the close collaboration. And I think that that's one of the things that a tool like this can do, is to really require that kind of collaboration, because we do need each other, and particularly to address homelessness. And I think that these are learning experiences, and obviously they're not all going to go well right out of the box. But I think in the case, we were quite successful. We're currently at a little over 100% utilization of the vouchers. Don't tell HUD. But if you look at the dashboard, we're at about 104% for the region, which I think represents quite a successful uptake. We worked closely to get both targeting of, I think one of the facts that I think sometimes continuums don't see, but public housing agencies really know very well, is that you have to overissue in order to get to a number, right? So if you have a 65% success rate, then you have to issue enough to get to 100%. So like, you got to do the math there. And there are different places where there's some drop off. People drop off in the application process. People drop off in the leasing process. And so we worked closely to build out a model that would anticipate that. And then on the continuum side, we worked really closely with all of the service providers. So one of the things that gave us a really powerful opportunity to both engage our coalition on lived experience and service providers that had not otherwise contracted with the city and county for homeless services. So we had 80 different agreements signed up with service providers to connect and refer through the emergency housing voucher program, and half of them had not previously held a contract with the city or the county to do homeless services work. So that was really exciting for us. Some of them were very small organizations, and they're focused on particularly vulnerable populations. We did create particular paths for example, on the rapid rehousing, we created a path for folks who looked like they were going to be unsuccessful with their rapid rehousing, that they essentially just needed a longer term subsidy. Created a path for people to move out of permanent supportive housing and free up that unit. We also ensured that our coordinated entry priority pool got well established. But the other thing that was a little challenging for this program, while I really appreciated the requirement of collaboration between the continuum and the public housing agencies, one of the things that was very challenging was that there was no service funding for this program. So it did come with some incentive capacity within the funding, which was very helpful. And I think that gave the housing authorities a tool to address some of the concerns for landlords. It provided some fees for navigation. It provided some additional admin fees for the PHAs to get going. It didn't provide the continuums any fees. So but the service funding, I think, was a major gap. So what we couldn't really ask folks to take on a service commitment that they couldn't otherwise sustain. So we did something that was very similar to what we used in LA, which was a process we called reverse matching, which is like, okay, you're working with folks, your population better than anyone. And so like, please work with the folks that you're working with, refer in folks who, if you have households that would be a good fit for rapid rehousing, they don't need a long-term subsidy, but could make it just need to be reestablished, use rapid rehousing. If you need to put people into long-term supportive housing where they have full, a lot of wraparound services needed for a considerable period of time, please don't refer folks like that unless you're willing to make that commitment. If you want to make this tenant-based supportive housing, that's great, but you really do have to commit to that long-term durable wraparound services. Otherwise, the goal for this program is folks who are sort of in that middle zone where there isn't really a resource. Long-term rental subsidy, a stabilizing amount of tenancy support and housing navigation services that you can provide because you're already working with these folks. And that worked very effectively. So we got a very large number of folks engaged through that ability. And about half of them were coming in through programs that were addressing people who were unsheltered. And, the others, it was a broad mix. So we got a pretty solid group of referrals there. And I think that we, working with the landlord incentives that we could arrange through the public housing agencies, working with the housing navigation, I think there was a lot of really entrepreneurial housing navigation done by the navigators in these organizations that were working. A lot of the landlords that came in were community-based landlords that don't have a large portfolio. They're not posted. They've got signs on their properties as opposed to using other services. We did get a bit of a boost from our public housing agency partners. They opened their portfolios to us, and there were, in the city of Seattle, there was a new building or a couple of buildings that opened that we were able to lease into in King County. They opened their own private equity, private portfolio, and so those were very, very helpful. But the vast majority were just placed with the the private landlord market, and I think that folks were both able to engage that market. It's a little choppy right now because of the after effects of the pandemic and the rental issues there and the eviction prevention programs. There's a lot of concern in there, and I think folks were eager to get a voucher as opposed to some of the other assistance. So I think that was helpful as well. We had a very thorough partnership with our PHAs, and I was very encouraged by that. And I also, like I said, I really do think that the PHAs need to connect with and bond with their COCs, and I think this is helpful in doing that.
Fantastic. Well, I am looking at my clock and our 90 minutes is up. I just want to turn it over to the panelists to see if anyone has any closing remarks or closing comments.
I just want to say a huge thanks to Tracy and Peter for joining us today and sharing their expertise, from the ground, from the field, from local communities. I think, Nichole and I sit in different seats, and so it's a privilege to hear both of you speak to your experiences. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I feel like we're doing great work. To hear that the challenges that we face are not just on the East Coast, they're nationwide. People always say nationwide, but being able to speak to someone from the other side of the country, and we're all experiencing the same things, mean that we're all on the same page, and we're going to resolve this issue. It may take several years, but we're going to resolve it because I think we all have the same agenda, and that's to end homelessness. And we're all thinking innovatively of ways to do that. So it's been a pleasure. It's been an honor to meet everyone on the panel. And I'm going to continue to follow this case and see how it turns out. And you can come to Atlanta anytime and do a study on us.
Thank you. Very grateful for the invitation, and we're really excited to read the results of the study. Very near and dear to my heart, and as I said, I think that to the extent that we can scale these kind of programs, this is the core of what I think it will take to address the nation's homelessness crisis. We have a stock issue, but mostly we have an affordability gap, and I think that's where this tool plays such an important role for folks.
Absolutely. Well, Christina, Tracy, Peter, I'm so incredibly grateful for the work that you do in each of your communities and sharing your wealth of expertise and knowledge with us on the call today. So thank you very much. For all the panelists or all the webinar participants who are still on, thank you so much for attending today. Like I said, the slides and the webinar presentation, as well as the word cloud, will be posted on the Hilton Foundation website, as well as the Abt website. If anyone has any questions about the report, the findings, what we discussed today, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is on the final screen and will be in the contact information when we post on the Hilton Foundation website and the Abt Associates website. Thank you so much for your time today, and please have a safe and happy rest of your Thursday. Thank you so much. Take care.